Hello, hello, hello.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. How you doing?
I can't hear you.
Okay, ain't nothing I can do about that.
Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Very good. I
Can
can
you
hear.
hear me?
I just did. Yep, just now. Great.
Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Technology is a great thing, isn't it?
What's happening?
No, man. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Just working, just working, just working.
Where are you now? Are you in Durham or are you still up in New York?
No, I'm in Durham. I'm in Durham.
Okay.
I have an office here in Durham. I'm in Research Triangle Park.
Yeah. When we finish this chat, I need to talk to you offline. I need to connect you to someone. I was talking to him about you yesterday, but we'll come back to that. So the way this works, I started off by asking you two questions. I ask you to tell us your name and share anything about you feel comfortable sharing and feeling okay talking about.
Okay.
So
Okay, my name. Okay, Farad Ali, and I work in I work as an entrepreneur, but I've worked for many years as a community development, economic development person.
that's all you're gonna tell me? Okay, I work with that.
You gotta ask me the question. I promise I'll answer it. I promise.
Okay. So what is an economic development position and person do? What is the primary goals of your job currently and former jobs you've had? What is the goal?
Yeah. So previously, I've worked in the state of North Carolina to help minority businesses get access to the public and the private marketplace by helping them get connected with governments and with corporations so they can get opportunities. So I've worked with minority businesses. I worked with women-owned businesses. I worked with businesses that were focused on transportation. Mm-hmm. So we had a grant through the transportation, through SBA, and through the Department of Commerce to run these programs. So I've done that. I've worked for a national organization that focused on building minority-owned businesses around the country. So I was traveling around the country trying to build minority businesses and connecting them with corporations to engage.
And what are your observations? What have through all the work that you have done, what have you observed about your efforts and where wealth and economic development for persons of color fit in the schema of what we know as the United States?
Yeah, that we have a variety of size of businesses, from barbershops to corporations that are multi-billion dollars, and the breadth of the depth of corporations businesses that we have are B to C, where we deal directly with the consumer. And then the fewest of our companies, as you go up the triangle, at the top are more B to B, right? So those are the ones that are less seen. Probably you hear about them, but they're less seen. And so, the vast majority of our minority businesses are in the smaller, the base of the pyramid, not the top of the pyramid.
And just in your estimation, where do you see wealth equity among Black and brown persons, just overall, from home ownership to savings to the ability to start businesses? Do you have a thought or something you'd like to share about that may help us understand where the picture is for Black and brown people financially in America?
Well, yeah, we don't have the same net worth. Black and brown people don't have the same net worth as the white community, and that adversely affects the ability to do the things, to buy consumer goods, housing, cars, and also to provide, to have savings that end up preparing you for the next level, right? And then creating generational wealth by passing stuff down. So we didn't have the institutional wealth of families over a period of time that allows us to be able to resort to going back to those things. So our great-great-grandfathers weren't landowners of 200 acres of farm land that later they sold to their children, that the children later gave to their children, and then you get it again, and then then you end up selling to a housing development, and while you may no longer have the land, now you have the income, the wealth, and then that wealth allows you the ability to make additional wealth. And so while you're not passing down the land that you once owned, you're now passing down cash or businesses or even the house you live in. But we don't have we don't have the vast framework or the vast foundation of wealth in our lineage for us to be able to leverage a lot of assets to be able to build, businesses and other things. So that's why a lot of our businesses are B2C, because we rely directly on our customer, our clients, to build our incomes and our wealth. Then the businesses that we have that are greater, those are hard to organically grow these days. You usually have to get those through acquisition.
So, do you think that the lack of wealth stems from slavery or Jim Crow, or is it just systematically we're not aware or have information about how to acquire, how to manage money, where's the breakdown between, what they did and what had happened during slavery to where we are now in the 21st century with the same conversation about wealth?
Yeah, so it's complex. It's probably more. I can't say we can't manage. I'm just, it's like we didn't have it. So it's not. It hasn't been a topic of conversation because you're not passing a lot of wealth down for others to be able to accumulate it. Right. So, my kids may get conversations at the table that my parents never had, and my parents had conversations with me that their parents never had. So you had the lack of opportunity. It's like we're getting new enlightened opportunities that are relational or familiar through family. We may be just encountering them. We talk around first generation college. Some of us are talking about first generation home ownership today, right? Some people are talking about first generation, life insurance policies that are passed down at funerals, and not people gathering money to just be able to bury their family members. So I say all that to say that it's so complex because every family situation is affected, and depending on if it was a family situation that was in the rural communities, they deal with a whole different level of circumstances than if you're in the urban communities that has a different level of circumstances that may help or breed your ability to grow and develop. And then, a lot of times we had big families because we were farmers in the rural communities, and those families didn't want to farm anymore when they got older, so they either got educated or they left. And then in the urban communities, they may not have been able to find success, and they may became a part of the industrial age where they worked in factories, and they provided good incomes, but not enough that you could, enough maybe to get a house and maybe get to pay for college through a second mortgage or buy a car, but not necessarily creating wealth.
So that brings me to the question of, okay, so that's one part of the equation, but when you get to the other side of the equation, last night I had the pleasure of talking with Mayor Schul, and he brought up that they are actually pushing forth an effort for reparations. So the governors of various Democratic states are looking at putting forth legislation for reparations. What would that mean for Black families and families whose ancestors we can only trace back just so far? How far can we go to know who our ancestors are? I can tell you my great grandmother on both my mother and my father's side, and I stop right there because I don't know who their parents were, or their children, or their cousins were. So what does reparation mean?
Yeah, actually, I think it's going to be tough because this is not uncommon to our community. They gave reparations to the Koreans, I believe. Ronald Reagan wrote a bunch of checks. I think they gave $20,000 or $200,000 to every Korean family. I can't remember if it's Korean. It's some Asian descent family for one of the wars. I think there's a lot of discussion about reparation in a way that's not really clear, and it keeps us confused. And that lack of clarity makes it so, right? So we're in a place now when we're becoming a colorless society. And you got to remember, 1857 or some point, they said if we had interracial, one drop of black made you black. So you had the superiority between white and black. And that was back then. Then you had Richard Nixon saying in the 60s that the only time that someone should get an abortion is if they were raped or if a black person and a white person engaged.
Remember that too.
So now you're dealing with, that was in the 1800s. Then you got this dealing with 21st century. And you start thinking about, or 20th century, I'm sorry. And you start thinking about what does reparations look like in a society where we now have people who are engaged with different races. And then we have really lack of, in the new world that we're in, a lack of tracing color because your color is no longer on your license. So government IDs don't provide racial identification anymore. So birth certificates may not identify as black or white. Your driver's license don't identify black or white. So you start having lack of this kind of identification.
Yeah.
And so that can be tough. I mean, my birth certificate doesn't have black or white. Someone was trying to, I was working, business owner, they were like, prove it. I was trying to get minority certification. So, I thought it'd be no problem. I'm obviously a black man. And I started looking for identification to get certification. And there's nowhere black on my life, right? I mean, I know I'm black and I've self-identified as black, but there's no government ID. So I had to go get my father's birth certificate and my grandfather, or death certificate, what they would call colored and Negro, to even to have that kind of identification. So I think the first reason why I said I'm giving you all this stuff to kind of say that because I don't think there's a pathway, I don't hear of a pathway to determine who's black, then the next thing becomes, then how do you look at that number to discern how much you're going to give back in reparations, if that's going to be in a monetary form, right? It'd be trillions of dollars, and it'd be trillions of dollars. So that's what I'm saying. And so when you hear people talk about it, I think that some people are talking about it, and I can't judge the intention of someone's heart. Some people are talking about it in theoretical process, or it could be academy, but the actual application of making it all happen, I've not heard any discussion of that. I have not seen any documents reference to the number of black people, the number of what we would give, and then what does that equate in dollars, other than it's going to be trillions.
I went back, so my family's been forever trying to figure out who they are and where they came from. We knew we were in South Carolina, but really that's all it is. So up until the 1940 census, the Newtons did not exist in any kind of documented form. And then when I got the 1940 census, I found my grandfather. And my grandfather was a white man. His wife and his children were his property. So they're listed as that. So his wife, her name was there as property. And the 7 children they had were property, not his wife. It didn't list his wife like you and your wife are, but I mean, literally, she was listed as chattel property. And all 7 of their kids were listed as chattel property. This is in the 1940s census. So when I look at that, like, okay, so I know my last name, and I know that they say this white man is my grandfather, but I don't know. And to your point earlier, Skip, my husband's birth certificate from Columbia, South Carolina, says he is white. I mean, it literally says on his birth certificate he is white. And I don't know what the reason is for that. So we recently got a new birth certificate. Now he's black. Thank God he's made the transition back to black. But, I think your point is really reasonable, because like you know, the other side of that really affects me is technology, right? So there get these genetic detectives, they call them, and they're able to look at your DNA to tell you something about who you may be or what your health risks are and all that stuff. But they also use that to criminalize behavior.
Right.
So like if you got a cousin who has a DNA link to you, they can say, well, okay, if I can find him, then I can find his cousin and persecute him for something he may have done or not done. But that's what these new technologies are doing now. So I really think it's going to be a difficult challenge. I mean, I don't even know what a number would be. I mean, like someone wrote the other day, if you can imagine going to work for somebody for 244 years and never getting paid a dime, and to be beaten, whipped, and raped, and choked, and killed, and all that stuff, what is reparation? Which I thought was a profound thought. 244 years without a penny.
Right.
That's deep. That's really deep.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is this. So what is it to be a Black man in the financial world? So are you able to navigate the world? Are you received by the financial community without any judgment or consideration that you may not be qualified to be in that space?
Yeah, it all depends on what, and it all depends on what angle you're coming at it from. Working in working in a financial institution is different than being a financial advisor or a financial accountant, because then your customer is who you're working for, right? And so that's different. But if you're working in financial environments, I think it's better today because a lot of the stuff that they do is um, AI work, right? They're making decisions based on some kind of program. They're making fewer decisions based on, you know, intellect and viewing the processes. They're doing it through whatever the computer says, yes or no, and if no, then this. Um, but some of the AI work that's in there may have some embedded racism in it that would eliminate people from the opportunity to participate. So, you know, um, I think in the financial world, it's always tough because you may or may not be accepted. But in the second part of it, if you are able to have some successes, people are going to celebrate it because it's such an AI world, right? It's just really get stuff in to get stuff out. Stuff is so in finances now, things are moving such to an empirical process that the people play little roles. I mean, you get an apartment, they pull up your credit report, you get a score, yes or no.
Yeah.
Go to get your insurance, they pull it up, yes or no. Housing, yes. I mean, it's nothing. It's different today. I'm not saying there's no racism in the work, right? Because I think there's racism in the AI as well as racism in how they bring you in. But there's definitely different respect. You may not get as many white clients because they may not be as comfortable with you than other people. But that's everywhere.
Now, yesterday I had a talk with a professor at Duke who does tax law, and he and I talked about that very thing. That he said even today redlining still exists in
Right.
in housing, and that although technology is, and this is not him, this is me saying this, although technology, AI, for those who don't know, is artificial intelligence, but AI is not set to care. Supposedly it's supposed to be blind, but it's not, right? So if you live in a zip code where there's high crime, poverty, whatever it is, insurance rates, loans, all that stuff is being done by a machine that's based on some data. Some person has written that code, and more times than not, it's not a diverse person that's written that code that will say, if you live in zip code X, Y, and Z, your loan rate is going to be this much, whereas you live in zip code over here, your loan rate is going to be this way, and we're just going to walk you on through it. So I agree that technology is not necessarily going to be always helpful specifically to black and brown people. And further, I don't know if you knew this, but in 2015, Google came out with their facial recognition software. They were the first to pilot facial recognition software. And the people who developed the code were all white men. So whenever it saw someone that did not look like them, it put up a picture of a gorilla. Now, Google immediately took it down, apologized, and all that stuff. But it's one of those things that reiterates, what it means not to have a diverse group of people working on these new and emerging technologies.
Right.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question that's the other side of that. So what is it like to just be a Black man in America? Simply, just a Black man going about your life, living your life and doing what you do. Is it different, or do you see it? It's of no consequence?
I just, that there's challenges, right? So it's from, and I'm saying right, not to get affirmation, but there's just challenges. There's so many things that you have to, you may or may not have as, um, you may not have as cushions or fallback positions. And so it matters from the standpoint of how you engage with the criminal system, how you engage in workplace, how you engage in social settings, even going out to eat dinner, or how you may have to engage with getting your car fixed, or, it's understanding that people's perception of you may not be pleasant, and you need to be able to cope in a way not to create chaos. Sometimes you have to deflate yourself to get through, so you don't get killed or embarrassed in front of your kids, or whatever it may be. So you gotta navigate through all that, and also people they being black, being a Black man has its the disadvantages. We The talent of being a Black man is being able to know that you have to do so many things to survive.
Right.
I always look at Black men as, I love it because we have to survive. And when we fail to have the survival skills in this complex, chaotic society, we are persecuted or prosecuted, or just evaluated and emasculated in so many different ways that it goes to the core of who we are.
It written in your DNA. Someone wrote a paper in 2014 that said the average Black person has PTSD from the gene coding of slavery to today, making your genes learn how to keep you alive, making genes understand that you're at risk simply because you're Black or brown, and conversely for white people, their DNA and their genes are written to always have power and to dominate, so you got those two dichotomous philosophies at war with each other in a world where, it's getting browner every day, it's getting browner every day. So I think that in a lot of ways we are kind of struggling to figure out how to safely travel through society. So to further my question, have you ever been stopped by a police officer or a law enforcement person?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you feel? Were you afraid? Did it concern you? Were you worried?
It all depends on, I've been pulled so many times, you just like, okay, here we go, right? So I think that the level of heightened anxiety is dependent upon how many times you've had engagements with the police, right or wrong, right? Been pulled for simple things as, oh, your light was out, you were speeding, or you're a criminal, get out the car, let me search you. I've had all of them, right? But once you've experienced it, you're prepared for the next time. And the more experiences that you've had, the more prepared you are for it, particularly if you know you're innocent, right? I mean, innocent of anything that's not felonious. Right. But yeah, and it may or may not be. I don't think it's necessarily a color issue all the time of the police officer who's pulling you. It may be the culture or whatever they act going on with themselves or what they're trying to achieve. If it's pulling people that they say are speeding through stoplights, or it's a lot of things, dynamics. But the experience for me is always anxiety. But I have far less anxiety now than I did when I was 16.
Why?
Because I do know how to cope now, but when I was 16 years old, it was, oh hell, what does this mean? I don't know. And I mean, you can almost do about anything, right? Cops can do almost about anything because you feel like they're the superior.
Mhm.
At 50 years, you know how to manage through that process, right? We know the questions to ask, the way to go through. It's a whole lot better process. Not that even I want to experience it, but I know how to experience. I know how to engage it today.
And so can that be extrapolated to say that all the Black men that have been killed by law enforcement have not mastered that skill of how to interact with law enforcement?
No, that would be a false statement because some people have encountered in different environments. You were saying being pulled by the police.
Yeah.
Yeah. But being shot by the police or getting out of the car or arrested by the police and killed that way or breaking into your house and shooting you, that's a whole different environment, right?
Yeah.
But when you see them pulling you over, asking you for your license and all that process, I have less anxiety today than I did when I was 16.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um,
You have children?
4.
Have you had a conversation with them about what you've learned over time about being?
Absolutely.
Why do you think it is black families, Black and brown families, have to have those conversations?
Because the system doesn't necessarily values them the same way that I do.
Yeah. I have a 21-year-old son, he goes to school in Greensboro College, which is a small Methodist college, but it's 48 miles from his door there to our door here. And the minute he pulls out the driveway, I start praying. And there's no exception. He must tell me he arrived at school and he's okay. Or, in the middle of the night when he's going out to get something to eat because he's hungry, my fear is up exponentially because I look at my phone and find my friends and where is he? So he's not at Greensboro College. He's at some restaurant or somewhere, and I'm afraid. And my son is probably one of the mildest, meekest people you will ever meet. He's an introvert to the nth degree, and he doesn't particularly care for interactions. So I don't think he would ever do anything that would provoke anything that would cost him his life. But then again, so have others who have not done anything that have cost them their lives. So it's that fear that Black and brown mothers carry with them every single day, that their children are away from them, they get home safely.
Yeah.
Skip told me a story when he went. The very first one I did was with Skip, and he told me about an experience he had when he was a young man helping somebody move and being surrounded by police officers with guns and shotguns pointed at him. And we've been married 27, 28 years. I had never heard that story. He had never told me that. And when I heard it, my fear heightened immediately. So now I'm more afraid for him now than I was prior to him telling me that story, because like, you look like somebody, or you're driving a car that looked like somebody who might have done something. So
right.
I don't know. I think it's pretty hard being Black and brown in America, just generally. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said absolutely.
So, as we talk about wealth, I want to bring you back to the point about housing and leaving housing. So, in neighborhoods, and specifically in Durham, I'm not going to talk about any place else because that's where I live, but specifically in Durham, where you have a neighborhood that has been blighted for a number of reasons. And all of a sudden you get a call from someone that says, hey, I'll give you $50,000 if you sell me your house. And you sell the house, $50,000 probably gone before you get through the day, and they put a $400,000 or $500,000 house in that neighborhood. And now you don't have the house or the money that you got because somebody's convinced you that you should sell your house and they're going to offer you this amount of money. Why is gentrification so unfair and unequal in terms of housing and what we have? Is that an issue where we don't understand, or is it because of our economic advantages or disadvantages, I should say?
I don't know. gentrification it's. Are you talking about Durham? I mean, I just think gentrification um, is it's a story of how um, people with resources come into um, blighted communities and then start building out, and that creates this new value. Um, but I think so many people participate in gentrification that it's people try to talk about gentrification like it just happened. And I try to remind people, no, it did not just happen. There were so many factors that led up to the gentrification that um, every situation becomes different, right? So, yeah, if someone has um, no money and they get a $50,000 check and they're able to take that $50,000 check and go buy another house and then it has new value and they're able to build, then that's okay, right? I mean, you can't really get mad because maybe they couldn't build the $500,000 house. Um, but you get what I mean? So it's so but sometimes gentrification is sparked by governments. The gentrification in Durham was sparked by governments, right? And developers building up downtown, which made the housing. So it wasn't necessarily a group of people. Now a group of people may have gentrified the community, but it was, people like to point to that. And I could go, no, that was the intent of a group of people early on. This was coming, right? So people participated in it.
So I grew up in South Carolina. I think you know that. And my mother raised me. She had a fourth grade education, and so she was a domestic, and she worked for white people. And 2 or 3 times a year, they'd go down to Hilton Head and have some big to do, and she'd be asked to go down there and cook and do all the things that they needed. But there was a time when Hilton Head was a Black community, completely Black, no white people anywhere. And slowly, they started getting their property, unable to pay their taxes, whatever it is, to making it so that this part of the world where it's so beautiful and so well mannered now have been lost to the Black community. I mean, it's just gone. And I don't know what the logic was back there, but I'm just assuming it had to be an economic issue for them to sell their land and sell their locations to something now that they can barely afford to go and live in now, because it's become such expensive land because there's proximity to water and temperature and things of that nature. And
Right.
So when we look at gentrification, I agree with what you said, but I think it goes way further back, right? So Spike Lee says 40 acres and a mule. Some people did get land. Some people were able to acquire land, but majority of the people, at least as far as I can tell, were not able to maintain or hold on to that land.
Right.
Because of laws or rules that people put in place.
Right. I agree.
So my last question is this, and I'm gonna give you time to say whatever you want to say. My last question is this. So in the books, there's been a lot that's been written about Black Wall Street. So we had one in Durham and we had one in Tulsa, Oklahoma. What were those institutions and why were they so easily destroyed?
Destroyed. So they were the insurance company and the bank was the main thing. I think there was some retail business that also developed around that and housing. So yeah, destroyed. The community was destroyed by the highway, which dealt with the housing, I think, and then the banks and the insurance company were unable to continue the growth that they needed to capitalize and to grow the way they need to grow. Again, I think that's another complex issue that deals with culture, community, capacity, and investment that did not happen. But you tear down a community because of a highway, you affect the housing and the values. You create these banks and that doesn't get maybe the same capitalization that other banks would get, and then the insurance company doesn't get, all that stuff starts to happen. You start losing over a period of time. You're going to lose, right? And that's what I think has happened over the period of time. They're losing, but I do think there's a resurgence now of all of that. The black banks are starting to get more capital invested, which allows them to lend more money. More people are banking black, so that gives them more money to lend, so they can lend. So they get to have the capitalization to maintain. And then the insurance companies are going to be, we have fewer minority insurance companies than we've ever had before. But a lot of people have picked up insurance as a part of their secondary business, like banks and car insurance companies, private, so, the whole marketplace has just changed. The business has changed. And so being able to have the ability to change your business simultaneously to meet that, I think, has been a challenge too.
But so Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Uh-huh.
literally killed and destroyed. Just you had a community that was thriving on its own without any need for dependency or something from whites. Became a threat to something for them. I don't know exactly what, but somehow became a threat, and they weren't happy until they burned that down and just literally just destroyed that. And as you say, there are some recoveries, but like what they had in Tulsa, I have not seen an example of that again in America, where you have a community that is completely self-dependent. A black or brown community is completely self-dependent on themselves. They don't need any outside help. They don't need to go to a white bank or a white whatever, because everything is right there in their community. And, in a matter of a day, it's gone.
Yeah. That's what happened. I don't know what to say. It's a sad story. It's hard. I think that goes back to the first question you asked me, or the second. It's like we don't have the same safety net.
Right.
So when you burn down our stuff, it's tragic. There's no recovery, right? Some people get to recover from disasters, and some people don't. And we are vulnerable to not being able to recover because we don't have that wealth, the wealth map to be able to, to get restored quickly.
Mm. It's an unfortunate thing. So we have 5 minutes. They're all yours. You can say anything you want to say. And I will tell you this, like the purpose of these are not for me. They really aren't. I've asked people from all races, genders, whatever, to talk so we can have a conversation for those that are not on CNN or not wherever, but those of us that are here and trying to understand how we do better. I learn a few things from white people. I learn a few things from black people, but I think it's important that they learn from each other. So I would just say, with all of your experience and all the things that you have done, this is a teaching moment for some people that may not know how to move from where they are to the next step, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I just think that it's from a diversity standpoint that if we can look at diversity as a requirement for our success, it changes the way we talk about it. We talk about it as a program, but if we talk about it as a success tool, it changes. I think it'll change the outcomes.
So how could there be Mr. Floyd a month ago, 3 weeks later, another black man shot in the back, 2 kids, into prestigious schools, tased? What are those things that we're missing? What is the thing that's not letting us get beyond not only just wealth inequity, but just being seen as human?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine what that is, right? It may be trained or taught or whatever, but that's the worst part of all this.
Absolutely. Well, when this video converts, I will send you a copy so you can look at it and tell me if I can upload it. But I'm going to start recording because I do have a question for you that not just for general information. So anything else you want to say before I stop recording?
No, no, no. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you too. I'm very grateful. Thank you.